Xin chào tất cả các bạn, chào mừng các bạn đã đến với buổi hội thảo IELTS trực tuyến do IDP tổ chức định kỳ hàng tháng. Mình là Thuận đến từ bộ phận IELTS của IDP và rất vui được đồng hành cùng với các bạn trong buổi sáng cuối tuần ngày hôm nay. Các bạn thân mến, tự hào là đơn vị đồng sở hữu kỳ thi IELTS thì IDP luôn mong muốn mang đến những hỗ trợ học thuật toàn diện cho tất cả các bạn thí sinh trong hành trình chinh phục kỳ thi IELTS. Và buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay, buổi hội thảo trực tuyến tháng 3 với chủ đề Chiến lược tối đa điểm IELTS Listening và Reading cùng với chuyên gia IELTS IDP hy vọng sẽ mang đến cho các bạn nhiều thông tin bổ ích về các bí kíp cũng như là chiến thuật làm bài giúp các bạn tối đa hóa điểm số cho hai kỹ năng nghe và đọc trong bài thi IELTS. Buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay của chúng ta thì sẽ được phát trực tiếp trên các kênh Facebook, fanpage của IELTS IDP, trên YouTube của IDP và cũng như là trên nền tảng Zoom. Nếu như mà các bạn có bạn bè, người thân cũng đang quan tâm đến kỳ thi IELTS và đặc biệt là mong muốn chinh phục hai kỹ năng nghe và đọc, thì các bạn cũng đừng ngại ngừng chia sẻ thông tin về buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay để cho các bạn cũng cùng được tham gia và tương tác cùng với IDP ha. Chương trình ngày hôm nay thì cùng với sự tham gia của thầy chuyên gia IELTS IDP với nhiều năm kinh nghiệm giảng dạy và luyện thi đào tạo IELTS thì hứa hẹn sẽ mang đến cho các bạn rất là nhiều những cái chia sẻ hữu ích. Chúng ta sẽ cùng gặp lại thầy Gary Henhoeffer trong phần chia sẻ chính của thầy trong một ít thời gian sau ha. Ok, ngay lúc này đây thì mình thấy là đã có khá là nhiều các bạn đang truy cập vào buổi hội thảo qua nhiều hình thức như là tham gia vào Zoom nè, hoặc là xem trực tiếp trên Facebook hoặc là YouTube. Thì để cùng làm quen với nhau một chút xíu thì các bạn có thể chia sẻ xem là hiện tại là mình đang đến từ các tỉnh thành nào không ạ? Mình xin phép được chia sẻ trước ha. Hiện tại là mình đang sinh sống và làm việc tại Đà Nẵng. Thì không biết là ngày hôm nay có bạn nào đang ở Đà Nẵng hoặc là các khu vực miền Trung không ạ? Các bạn cũng có thể là tương tác qua ô chat box của nền tảng Zoom, hoặc là các bạn có thể để lại bình luận trên Facebook hoặc là YouTube ha. Có thể cho mình biết là hiện tại các bạn đang đến tại các tỉnh thành nào không ạ? Nếu như mà các bạn đang sử dụng Zoom thì các bạn có thể gõ vào ô chat box ở phía dưới màn hình. Hoặc bạn nào đang coi trực tuyến trên fanpage và YouTube thì các bạn có thể để lại bình luận. Mình thấy là có bạn ở tận Đà Lạt nè, Bến Tre nè, Hồ Chí Minh, Đồng Nai, Gia Lai. Có bạn Minh Triết cũng đến từ Đà Nẵng, Hà Nội, Huế. Cảm ơn sự tương tác của các bạn ha. Thì có thể thấy là ngày hôm nay chúng ta có rất là nhiều bạn đến từ rất nhiều những tỉnh thành khác nhau trên mọi miền đất nước. Tuy nhiên có thể thấy là các bạn có chung một mối quan tâm đặc biệt ngày hôm nay đối với câu hỏi là làm sao có thể tối đa hóa được điểm số của hai kỹ năng listening và reading trong bài thi IELTS, đúng không nào? Vậy thì ngay bây giờ mình xin phép được bắt đầu chương trình ngày hôm nay cùng với một số những cái thông tin liên quan đến IDP và cũng như là những cập nhật mới nhất về kỳ thi IELTS ha. Đầu tiên về IDP Education. Sorry. IDP là tổ chức giáo dục hàng đầu thế giới được chính phủ Úc thành lập từ năm 1969 và hiện đang có mặt tại hơn 32 quốc gia với hơn 153 văn phòng trên toàn thế giới. Có mặt tại Việt Nam vào năm 1996 thì IDP Education Việt Nam vẫn luôn giữ vị trí dẫn đầu trong việc cung cấp các dịch vụ tư vấn du học và phát triển giáo dục tại Việt Nam. Không chỉ vậy thì IDP còn là đơn vị đồng sở hữu và tổ chức kỳ thi IELTS tại Việt Nam, cũng như là quản lý trung tâm đào tạo tiếng Anh ASAP và cổng thông tin du học lớn nhất Việt Nam hiện nay, đó là Hot Courses Việt Nam. Về kỳ thi IELTS thì trong suốt 26 năm vừa qua, IDP Việt Nam rất tự hào là đơn vị đồng sở hữu cũng như là tổ chức kỳ thi IELTS, đồng hành cùng với rất nhiều các thí sinh trên cả nước trong các kỳ thi IELTS. Là hệ thống đánh giá bài kiểm tra về khả năng sử dụng thành thạo tiếng Anh, bao gồm 4 kỹ năng nghe nói đọc viết, thì kết quả IELTS được chấp nhận bởi hơn 11.000 tổ chức cũng như là các trường đại học trên toàn thế giới. Và IELTS cũng được chính phủ Úc, Canada, New Zealand và Anh sử dụng cho mục đích định cư. Bài thi IELTS cũng đang có mặt tại hơn 140 quốc gia và IDP IELTS cung cấp bài thi tại hơn 400 địa điểm trên toàn cầu. Đặc biệt thì có hàng triệu thí sinh đã dự thi IELTS trên toàn thế giới mỗi năm. Những con số ấn tượng này thì cũng đã cho thấy được mức độ phổ biến của bài thi IELTS trên toàn thế giới ha. Và bảng điểm IELTS với điểm số đạt theo yêu cầu cũng như là mục tiêu đề ra của các thí sinh thì sẽ mở ra cánh cửa cho các bạn đi du học, định cư hoặc là tham gia các chương trình trao đổi, giao lưu sinh viên, học sinh quốc tế, hoặc là mang đến những cái cơ hội nghề nghiệp rất là hấp dẫn tại các công ty, tập đoàn đa quốc gia. Ngoài ra thì tại Việt Nam, IELTS cũng được sử dụng như là một thang điểm để xét tuyển vào kỳ thi tốt nghiệp trung học phổ thông, kỳ thi đại học. Cụ thể là theo như quy định của Bộ Giáo dục và Đào tạo Việt Nam thì với chứng chỉ IELTS 4.0, các bạn sẽ được miễn thi tốt nghiệp môn tiếng Anh và sẽ được quy đổi thành thang điểm 10. Thì như vậy là các bạn có thể thấy với IELTS thì một tấm bằng nhưng mà mang đến cho chúng ta hàng triệu cơ hội, đúng không ạ? Như các bạn thấy đó là với một mức độ phổ biến và ngày càng rộng rãi của bài thi IELTS thì theo nhu cầu ngày càng tăng của các thí sinh, bài thi IELTS hiện nay ngoài bài thi IELTS trên giấy truyền thống thì chúng ta còn có thêm một sự lựa chọn nữa, đó là thực hiện bài thi IELTS trên máy tính. Thì vào năm 2018, IDP tự hào là đơn vị đầu tiên mang bài thi IELTS trên máy tính về Việt Nam. Nhằm mang đến sự thoải mái, tự tin cũng như là giúp thí sinh đạt kết quả tốt nhất thì các phòng thi máy tính của IDP đều được trang bị đầy đủ các cơ sở vật chất hiện đại, đạt chuẩn quốc tế, với 100% màn hình máy tính là kích thước 21 inch nè, bộ lưu điện UPS để đảm bảo cái tính liên tục trong bài thi, và cũng như là tai nghe Bluetooth riêng biệt chống ồn. Trên màn hình các bạn có thể thấy đây là hình ảnh thực tế của phòng thi IELTS trên máy tính tại trụ sở mới của IDP ở Hồ Chí Minh, tại 161 Hai Bà Trưng, quận 3, Hồ Chí Minh ha. Thì so với bài thi trên giấy thì bài thi trên máy tính sẽ có một số những cái ưu điểm nổi trội hơn về lịch thi, thời gian trả kết quả cũng như là các tính năng và thao tác làm bài. Cụ thể thì đối với bài thi IELTS trên máy tính thì các bạn sẽ có kết quả rất là nhanh. Mình sẽ nhận được kết quả chỉ sau từ 3 đến 5 ngày, so với bài thi trên giấy là 13 ngày ha. Hơn nữa là lịch thi đối với bài thi IELTS trên máy tính thì rất là linh hoạt, trải dài ở tất cả các ngày trong tuần, và thậm chí là mỗi ngày thì chúng ta có rất là nhiều ca thi, lên đến 3 ca trong một ngày. Và đặc biệt là đối với bài thi trên máy tính thì sẽ rất là phù hợp đối với những các bạn thí sinh ở tỉnh xa, vì các bạn sẽ tiết kiệm được thời gian di chuyển rất là nhiều khi mà mình có thể thực hiện 4 kỹ năng chỉ trong một ngày, nghe nói đọc viết. Các bạn có thể hoàn thành 4 kỹ năng trong cùng một địa điểm và trong cùng một ngày thì rất là tiện lợi cho các bạn. Ngoài ra thì mình cũng xin chia sẻ một tí xíu về những cái ưu điểm liên quan tới thao tác và chức năng làm bài trên bài thi trên máy tính. Các bạn vẫn có thể highlight, take note trên màn hình, giúp cho các bạn tiết kiệm thời gian rất là nhiều, và đặc biệt là các bạn có thể sử dụng những phím tắt như là copy paste để mình sử dụng trong cả 3 kỹ năng là nghe, đọc, viết, để cho các bạn có thể tiết kiệm thời gian. Và đặc biệt hơn nữa, một tính năng mà mình đặc biệt gọi là tâm đắc đối với bài thi trên máy tính, đó là chức năng đếm từ khi mà các bạn làm bài thi viết. Các bạn không cần phải mất thời gian để đếm từ giống như là trong bài thi giấy nữa. Thì cụ thể về những cái chức năng này cũng như là các thao tác làm bài trên máy tính, thì IDP có tổ chức một buổi hội thảo riêng định kỳ hàng tháng. Thì các bạn nếu mà quan tâm và mong muốn được trải nghiệm trực tiếp cái hình thức thi này cùng với IDP, thì các bạn hãy đón chờ thông tin về cái buổi hội thảo này trên fanpage, cũng như là IDP sẽ gửi email đến cho các bạn thí sinh đã đăng ký thi thành công với IDP. Cùng chờ đón những cái thông tin trong buổi hội thảo này để các bạn có thể được trải nghiệm và có nhiều những cái thông tin liên quan tới bài thi IELTS trên máy tính hơn ha. Và bây giờ thì để cho các bạn có được một cái nhìn cụ thể hơn một tí về bài thi IELTS trên máy tính, thì chúng ta hãy cùng xem qua một video clip nói về bài thi IELTS trên máy tính tại IDP ha.
Chào các bạn, mình là Đời Nhật Ân, mình là sinh viên 3 của Đại học Bách khoa Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh.
Dạ em chào anh chị, dạ em tên là Hải Anh, là học sinh của trường Trung học phổ thông Nguyễn Thị Minh Khai.
Xin chào mọi người, em tên là Trần Bảo Đức. Hiện tại thì em đang học tại Viện Đào tạo Quốc tế Đại học Ngân hàng.
Em chọn thi IELTS trên máy tính tại IDP tại vì mình có thể chọn linh hoạt mỗi ngày, thuận tiện hơn là trên giấy.
Em được bạn bè giới thiệu á chị, tại kiểu tất cả các bạn của em ở trong trường đều thi ở trong IDP nên là em được mọi người giới thiệu tới đây. Em thấy chỗ này cũng uy tín hết trời nên là em lựa chọn thi ở IDP.
Em được giới thiệu từ bạn bè, thầy cô về cơ sở vật chất cũng như là những cái tiện ích mà IDP mang lại cho sinh viên thi.
Em cảm thấy môi trường ở đây nó thuận tiện vì ở đây có cơ sở vật chất riêng, không có thi ở khách sạn. Mỗi lần mà mình đi thi mình không có cần phải tìm địa chỉ.
Em thấy là mấy cái thủ tục mình làm cũng dễ dàng á chị, kiểu chỉ có một số cái từ lúc mà em coi cái form đăng ký nó hơi khó hiểu một xíu thì sẽ Google tí lại, em có thể dễ dàng điền được cái form mà nó không khó, nhưng là cái lúc mà em nghĩ là lúc em đăng ký nó sẽ gặp khó khăn.
Em lựa chọn thi tại IDP bởi vì là có nhiều sự giới thiệu từ bạn bè cũng như những cái thầy cô ở trường em.
Mình thấy là không gian thì sạch sẽ, thoáng mát, môi trường thì rất là thuận tiện, cùng với đội ngũ nhân viên phục vụ rất là tận tình.
Dạ, cảm nhận của em về địa điểm 161 Hai Bà Trưng là ở đây rất là mát mẻ, kiểu sạch sẽ, tạo cảm giác mà dễ chịu khi cho người tham dự tới thi á chị. Những mấy cái phòng thi, cái phòng nào cũng sạch sẽ ngăn nắp hết trơn.
Cảm nhận của em về địa điểm 161 Hai Bà Trưng này thì phòng thi về nhiệt độ rất là phù hợp, không nóng quá cũng như là không quá lạnh. Về tai nghe thì em thấy là rất là ổn. Dạ, đó là những cảm nhận của em.
Qua video vừa rồi thì nếu như mà các bạn mong muốn được trải nghiệm các thao tác về bài thi IELTS trên máy tính, thì ngoài việc là chờ đón những cái buổi hội thảo hướng dẫn của IDP, thì nếu như mà các bạn muốn trải nghiệm ngay thì mình hãy liên hệ với IDP ở các đầu thành phố Sài Gòn, Hà Nội và Đà Nẵng để mình có thể đăng ký một cái buổi trải nghiệm thao tác trực tiếp bài làm trên máy tính ha. IDP luôn tổ chức những cái buổi trải nghiệm mà trực tiếp như thế này để cho tất cả các thí sinh có cơ hội được thao tác trực tiếp cái bài làm IELTS trên máy tính ngay tại văn phòng của IDP. vào định kỳ vào hàng tuần ha, thì các bạn có thể liên hệ trực tiếp để mình được hướng dẫn nha. Với các thí sinh đăng ký thi IELTS cùng với IDP thì như mình chia sẻ là các bạn ngoài việc thi trên máy tính thì hiện nay là IDP vẫn tổ chức bài thi IELTS trên giấy với lịch thi cũng khá là linh hoạt, đều đặn hàng tháng với rất nhiều buổi thi vào thứ Năm hoặc là thứ Bảy. Các bạn nếu mà mình có những câu hỏi liên quan tới lịch thi, cách thức đăng ký, cũng như là những cái hỗ trợ xuyên suốt trong quá trình đăng ký và ôn luyện, thì các bạn hãy liên hệ với trung tâm văn phòng IDP ở các đầu thành phố Sài Gòn, Hà Nội và Đà Nẵng để được hỗ trợ trực tiếp ha. Khi mà đăng ký thi IELTS cùng với IDP thì các bạn sẽ nhận được trọn gói các gói hỗ trợ của IDP như mình đã chia sẻ, là từ việc đăng ký thi đến phần ôn luyện, cũng như là sau khi nhận được kết quả. Thì sau khi đăng ký thi thành công với IDP thì các bạn sẽ nhận được khóa học luyện thi online của IDP hợp tác cùng với trường đại học Macquarie, là một trong những cái bộ hỗ trợ học thuật toàn diện đặc biệt mà IDP mong muốn mang đến cho các thí sinh của mình. Các bạn có thể chọn một kỹ năng IELTS cần ôn luyện như là nghe, nói, đọc hoặc là viết, và truy cập vào trong kho tài liệu lên đến 30 ngày sử dụng. Ngoài ra nếu mà các bạn mong muốn ôn tập và bao quát tất cả các kỹ năng, cả 4 kỹ năng, thì các bạn có thể truy cập không giới hạn vào bộ tài liệu luyện thi này trong 4 ngày sử dụng ha. Và ngoài ra hầu như ngày nay thì các bạn ai cũng có sử dụng điện thoại thông minh smartphone ha, thì với rất là nhiều những cái tính năng hỗ trợ trong học tập và làm việc mà điện thoại thông minh mang lại, thì hiện nay IELTS IDP năm vừa qua cũng đã vừa cho ra mắt cái ứng dụng trên điện thoại, đó là IELTS by IDP, với giao diện cực kỳ thân thiện với người dùng. Thì tất cả những gì mà các bạn thí sinh cần từ trước, trong và sau kỳ thi IELTS thì sẽ đều được tích hợp trong cái ứng dụng này, với đầy đủ các tư liệu về thông tin về ôn thi nè, cách thức đăng ký thi như thế nào, cũng như là việc tra cứu kết quả, thì các bạn có thể hoàn toàn truy cập mọi lúc mọi nơi, và đặc biệt là việc tra kết quả thi rất là nhanh chóng. Thì các bạn hãy cùng nhìn trên màn hình ha. Ở đây trên màn hình thì mình có để cái mã QR code để các bạn có thể quét mã và tải cái ứng dụng này về trên điện thoại. Thì đối với những bạn nào mà chưa đăng ký thi với IDP thì các bạn có thể vào ứng dụng này xem trực tiếp lịch thi, bao gồm cả lịch thi trên giấy, thi trên máy tính, cũng như là tất cả các bài thi IELTS. Còn những bạn nào mà đã đăng ký thi thành công với IDP rồi, các bạn cũng có thể sử dụng cái ứng dụng này để truy cập vào cái bộ tài liệu luyện thi của IDP gửi về cho các bạn. Cũng như là khi mà có kết quả thi IELTS thì các bạn cũng hoàn toàn có thể tra cứu kết quả của mình ngay tại ứng dụng này luôn. Cho nên là rất là tiện lợi nếu như mà các bạn có thể sở hữu cái ứng dụng này ở trong điện thoại của mình ha. Một chia sẻ nữa đó là ngoài ra thì IELTS IDP cũng có riêng kênh YouTube cũng như là TikTok để giúp cho các thí sinh của mình có thể cập nhật nhanh nhất các thông tin hữu ích liên quan về kỳ thi IELTS, cũng như là xem lại các buổi hội thảo của IDP mà các bạn bị bỏ lỡ. Nên là đừng chần chừ, các bạn hãy cùng search lại thông tin kênh YouTube của IELTS IDP Việt Nam cũng như là kênh TikTok để theo dõi cũng như là chờ đón những cái thông tin liên quan tới kỳ thi IELTS ha. Trong tháng 2 và tháng 3 này thì IDP cũng mang đến rất là nhiều những cái ưu đãi đặc biệt dành tặng cho các thí sinh khi mà đăng ký thi IELTS trên máy tính. Nếu như các bạn đăng ký thi IELTS trên máy tính các ngày trong tuần từ thứ Hai đến thứ Sáu, từ nay cho đến hết ngày 31 tháng 3, đối với các ngày thi đến hết ngày tháng 6 năm 2023, thì tại Hồ Chí Minh, Đà Nẵng và Hà Nội thì các bạn sẽ nhận được thứ nhất là bộ tài liệu luyện thi độc quyền từ IDP, cũng như là các hỗ trợ học thuật kèm theo như mình đã chia sẻ trước đó ha. Ngoài ra thì các bạn còn có cơ hội nhận được phiếu mua sắm trị giá 300.000. Và riêng đối với các bạn thí sinh mà đăng ký ca thi sau 17 giờ các ngày trong tuần thì các bạn còn có cơ hội nhận được thêm bộ quà tặng rất là đáng yêu từ IELTS IDP, đó là quạt điện cầm tay mini. Nên là bạn nào có dự định thi IELTS, đã có kế hoạch sẵn từ trước và đang mong muốn chọn lựa một cái hình thức thi có kết quả thi nhanh chóng, thì các bạn hãy nhanh tay đăng ký thi IELTS trên máy tính cùng IDP, liên hệ ngay với văn phòng ở các thành phố mà các bạn đang sinh sống, hoặc là các bạn có thể liên hệ thông qua kênh đối tác của IDP IELTS để các bạn có thể được hỗ trợ và đăng ký thi ha. Và như có chia sẻ từ trước thì buổi hội thảo ngày hôm nay với chủ đề là chiến lược tối đa điểm IELTS Listening và Reading, thì chúng ta sẽ có sự đồng hành của chuyên gia IELTS IDP, đó là thầy Gary Henhoeffer, với nhiều năm kinh nghiệm giảng dạy và đào tạo IELTS ở nhiều quốc gia, trong đó có Việt Nam. Thì ngày hôm nay rất là vui mừng được chào đón sự tham gia có mặt của thầy để cùng chia sẻ và tương tác với các bạn thí sinh. Cuối buổi chia sẻ của thầy thì chúng ta sẽ có 10 phút để mà đặt ra các câu hỏi mà các bạn thắc mắc liên quan đến hai kỹ năng listening và reading. Thì các bạn hãy dành những câu hỏi đó đến cuối giờ để chúng ta có thể cùng chia sẻ và tương tác cùng với thầy ha. Và bây giờ xin mời thầy Gary sẽ bắt đầu với buổi chia sẻ ngày hôm nay. Hello Gary.
Hello. How are you doing today? Are you ready for me to, should I start or?
Yeah, you can get started right now.
Oh, okay, perfect. Give me 1 second. I'll share my screen. Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to the IELTS workshop on reading and listening. My name is Gary Henhoeffer. I'm from Canada originally, and here's a little bit of a profile of me. I've lived in Hanoi for the last 5 years. Anyway, let's just begin. So we're going to first start by looking at reading, IELTS reading, and then we will look at listening, and then after that we will do a question and answer session as well. Can everyone see me? Okay. All right. I'm not sure what was asked about my camera. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Let's begin. So when we're looking at IELTS reading, there's a couple of different questions we can go through: matching headings, having to choose a title for a paragraph, the yes, no not given, true, false not given. And then we also have multiple choice questions, matching sentence endings, and of course, matching names. So we're going to go through a couple examples here. First off, we're going to look through true, false, not given. Always keep in mind you want to put in T, like true, false. You can't put yes or no for this if it's true and false. I think what we'll do is we'll go through a couple, and I'll show some tips as far as how to get the answers we're seeking. So let's start with this one here. So the question we have is: archaeologists went back to the site to try to find the missing end of the boat. So is this true, false, or not given? So this is a question, and here we can see the actual article, the text from the article. So the possibility of returning to Dover to search for the boat's unexcavated northern end was explored, but practical and financial difficulties were insurmountable, and there was no guarantee that the timbers had survived the previous decade in the changed environment. Okay. So the keys here, we're looking at the keywords of missing end of the boat. So we want to know whether or not they went back to the site to get the boat. So we can see here, to search for the boat's unexcavated northern end was explored. Okay. So this is saying they thought about doing it. And then we had the possibility of returning to Dover. So we know it's possible, but did it happen or not? And then we can see the following sentence clause, but practical and financial difficulties were insurmountable. So would this be true, false, or not given? And someone can either just speak, or you can send a message into the chat. Okay, I do see the first one there as false. It is false. Okay, excellent. And this is false, as we can see the missing end of the boat. So we have the northern end, the boat's unexcavated northern end was explored. But because we have practical and financial difficulties, so it wasn't easy to do from a practical standpoint, and also it was going to cost a lot of money. So with something like this, we want to look for the keywords and then the sentences around those keywords in order to give us the answer. Let's do one more of these. So in this one, we have evidence found in 2004 suggested that the Bronze Age boat had been used for trade. Okay. And the text states archaeological evidence was beginning to suggest Bronze Age community straddling the channel, brought together by the sea rather than separated by it. Okay. First off, I'll ask you to put in your answer for what you think this is. Okay, seeing a lot of true and not givens. Okay, let's go through this then. So we have the word evidence, which is a key word that's going to show us where in the text to look. Then the key in the question here, we know the time is Bronze Age, which also is in there, but the key here being boat had been used for trade. So of course, trade, buying and selling goods. And we can look at the actual text. So the evidence is suggesting a Bronze Age community, so people straddling the channel. So channel being, of course, like a distributary from a river or a sea. So we can see that there is a community living on both sides of the water, brought together by the sea rather than separated by it. So this is only speaking about the fact that we have evidence a community lived here on both sides of the sea. Now, it's very plausible and quite probable that the boat was used for trade, but it doesn't actually specifically say it here. So this is actually, so actually we look here, which is exactly what I said. The text implies that trade existed at the time, but there is nothing in the text suggesting what the boat was used for. So this is not given. Okay. Let's look at some different types of questions we may get in the reading. Now, this is also a tip for when you're practicing. Rather than just doing full tests, it's good to break up the readings. doing just one reading, for example, or one section of the reading, or maybe going through and looking for certain questions that are similar. So maybe going through true, false, not given on multiple tests to get good at that particular skill. One of the keys, of course, is expanding your vocabulary. One of the best ways to do well in reading is to have a wide range of vocabulary you can utilize when you're looking at this, because of the need to look at paraphrasing and synonym finds. Those are really the keys that help us with reading. They're very useful, as we'll see later here in listening as well. But definitely good, rather than just doing test after test, go through and break up the test into the different question points. And I'm going to show you another way to look at some reading in a little bit as well. So let's look at some of the headings. Now, I'll ask if any of the students here can suggest, how would you approach this topic if you need to go through a list of headings and assign them? What strategy would you utilize? Yeah, I like that, reading the first sentence. So very good. That is a very good idea. One of the keys here, the way I would recommend approaching is, first off, read the list of headings and just look for any of the key words that might stick out. That would be the first key. Then reading the first and last sentence of a paragraph usually will let you know what the paragraph is about. Definitely, it's a good way of being able to narrow down the list of possibilities. So let's do that together. And this one has a very short sentence, so we're going to have to go with two. We have, big trees are incredibly important ecologically. For a start, they sustain countless other species. So we know we're talking about how trees are important for the environment, and that because of trees, other species are able to exist. Now, we don't know if this is, by reading that first sentence, we don't know if this is other plants or if it's other animals or other species of insects. But then if we read the last sentence here, this allows them to produce massive crops of fruit, flowers, and foliage that sustain much of the animal life in the forest. So we can see we are talking about plants and animals. So by doing that and going through to eliminate answers that the headings that it would not be. So looking at those two things, even without reading the whole thing, we can see that the answer would likely either be number 3, which big trees support the most diverse species, or number 6, which is how wildlife benefits from trees. So having narrowed it down to those two options, we can then look at the rest of the paragraph and decide which of the two. So we can look at here, providing shelter for animals, trunks and branches can become gardens hung with ferns. And they're talking about other tall canopies as well. So by looking at this, we can see that it's not talking as much about the most diverse species as it is saying how wildlife as a whole benefits from these trees. So the key, if we look at the very last part of the sentence, and then the last part, that sustains, so it talks about the massive crops, so flowers, foliage, that sustain much of animal life. So the answer here, let me go back there for a second. The answer here is actually 6, how wildlife benefits. Okay, and let me just grab something to write on here. Okay, so we can see because of this last sentence, animal life, it's going to be 6. Let's try it again with the same thing. So we've already read the list of headings. So if we read just the first and the the first sentence, we have only a small number of tree species have the genetic capacity to grow really big. So we're talking about growth of a sizable nature. And then if we look at the last sentence, disrupt any of these and you could lose your biggest trees. So in this one, we're looking at growing big trees and to ensure their survivability. Okay, so right away we can look at the list of headings again, and with this we can probably narrow it down to 3 right away. So number 3, which big trees support the most diverse species? So are we talking about big trees helping other things live? We also have number 9, how high temperatures slow the rate of tree growth, because we're hearing growth again. And lastly, we have 10 factors that enable trees to grow to significant heights. So now that we have it narrowed down to these 3 things, we can actually, now that we have it narrowed down to these 3 things, we can read the middle of the paragraph to select the right one. So I've seen a few different, so please, out of those 3, put in what you think is the answer into the chat. And we will go through those. So we can talk about, as we go through the second sentence then, I see we have a lot of 10s. So we're going through the sentences here, but big trees grow all over the globe. To achieve giant stature, a tree needs 3 things: the right place to establish its seedling, good growing conditions, and lots of time with low adult mortality. So with that, we can know we're talking about how well trees grow. And as number 10 says, which is the answer, factors that enable trees to grow to significant heights. So we're talking about what allows the tree to grow to the extent that they do. Okay, we'll do one more of these. And again, put in the same idea. So if we read the first and the last sentence here. So the first sentence, in some parts of the world, populations of big trees are dwindling because their seedlings cannot survive or grow. Okay. So some big trees aren't doing very well in some parts of the world because they're not growing their seedlings, or when their baby trees aren't growing to the full extent. Now we look at the last sentence. The grass grows up to 4 meters tall and burns fiercely, creating super hot fires that cause catastrophic tree mortality. So we're talking about grass burning and creating fires that kill lots of trees. So if we can look at this one, we have a few options just by knowing that. We can look at 1, how deforestation harms isolated trees. So cutting down trees. 2, how other plants can cause harm. 4, impact of big tree loss on the wider environment. And lastly, 8, ways in which industry uses big trees. So if we look at the middle now, so we've narrowed it down to 4. If we look at the middle here, they're talking about southern India, an aggressive non-native shrub. So this is a plant, a shrub, is invading the floor of many forests. So a plant causing problems for trees. And then it explains why, because they grow so thick the trees can't take root. And then northern Australia, we're talking about gamma grass from Africa is overrunning native savanna woodlands. So out of the 4 options, we can look, the first one, how deforestation harms trees. No, that's cutting down trees. We're talking about plants. 2, how other plants can cause harm. That seems likely to be the answer. 4, the impact of big tree loss on the wider environment. So this was the one that's closest, but this is saying how losing trees affects the environment. What's actually being said in the text here is how the environment affects the trees. So we can, by knowing that, we know it's not number 4, it's actually number 2. Okay? So that is a good way of approaching these. of course, reading the headings first, and then the first and last sentence to narrow down your options, and then finally going through the actual paragraph to make sure which of the few options is the correct answer. Okay, let's look at something different. So when we're going through reading skills here, of course, skimming and scanning are very good skills to get good at. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Let's go with skimming first. Taking regular articles or short stories and just reading through, skimming through, trying to get the gist of what the article is about. It's a very good skill to develop, and I'll show you something you can try to improve that skill, as well as your scanning skills. These are great for scanning for certain words, scanning for numbers, figures, and with IELTS reading, there's lots of options for something like that. These are a couple reads, a couple websites that you can utilize as well. Okay, in the next one, what I would like to do is we're going to look at this practicing skimming skills and scanning skills, as well as some of the other skills. So one thing I like to do with some of my classes, and as a student is quite useful to work on, is to look at other non IELTS reading materials. So for this one particular, this is actually a fable. I'll put this into the chat so people can read it on their computer as well. Give me 1 second. Give me just one moment. I'll be right back, everyone. Sorry for the inconvenience. Someone's been knocking on my door. Give me 1 second. No, I can't come now. I'm teaching. I love you. I apologize for that, everyone. Okay, let me put this into the chat. Okay, I've dropped that in. Now, what this is this is a fable. Everyone knows a fable is typically a story told using animals as the characters, usually with some kind of meaning. It's very popular, especially with as children's books and stuff. Now, the reason I would utilize something like this is because we can get good at a lot of the skills by looking at fables. So the first thing I would do with something like this is we want to scan through for any words we don't know. Okay, is there any words that anyone doesn't know out of this? I'll allow you to scan. Dilemma and indignant. Very good. Those are the two that seem to be what comes up most. So we have, first off, I've defined fable as well. Dilemma is basically just a problem, an issue that you need to deal with, or a problem. And indignant. Indignant means expressing strong displeasure at something considered unjust or insulting. Okay, for example, to become angry or resentful for someone. So when you're very upset with someone because of something they've done that you don't believe is right or could be considered unjust. Okay, so after we go through these and define these words, one of the main things we do is sequencing. And sequencing comes up in IELTS reading a lot, because we have to, whether we're filling out flowcharts or some sort of diagrams, A lot of times there are sequences in the reading as well that we might have to look at what happens first, second, third, as a way of knowing which events happen first, as that's tested in not only flowcharts, but also multiple choice questions and other aspects as well. So what I would like to do is, I would like you to look through this article and try to find the 6 events and in what order do they come, okay? Once you've done that, please tell me what the first event is. Okay, would anyone be able to say what was the first event? Now, remember, when I say event, something that's actually occurring. Okay, I'll go through and work through it. So the first event is that the war is going to break out. Please let me know if anyone's had trouble opening that file. But I can go back here for a second. Hold on. There we go. So we had the great battle was about to take place between the birds and the bees. Oh. I will send it again for someone's having trouble getting. Okay, I've resent it into the chat. So if you had trouble opening it, you should ideally be able to now. Okay, so that is the first one, a great battle set to take place between the birds and the bees. Okay. Does anyone know what would the second one be? Okay, let's go through. Okay, the second one then being the. Okay, so the war is about to begin. Then we have the birds ask the bat to join. Okay, and number 3 would be what? Okay, so someone said the bat didn't know its side. That's good because that actually allows us to understand this better. So that wouldn't be an event because that's speculation. What that is you, by reading that, you're assuming or inferring that the bat didn't know that for a reason. But we're looking for an actual event. So someone says the bees do the same thing. And that's exactly it. So we have first the war about to start. Then we have the birds ask the bat to join. The bees do the exact same thing. What happens fourth? Excellent. So peace was made or the war didn't happen. Okay, so peace was made. And finally, there was 2 more events. So what was number 5? In the celebrations. Okay. And finally, there is one more. I'll just wait a few seconds in case anyone could put in the last event. Okay. And the last one, the bat is left alone. Yes. So, and thank you, Kandu, for sending that in. Yes, the bat got declined by the 2 sides, so he left. So the bat is left alone. So these are the events. Now, the reason is we do the sequencing like this is because being able to practice using different articles to be able to pull out events quickly is a skill that we need to use in IELTS reading. So this is a skill that if we get good at, will help your reading scores overall, because you'll be able to easily go through, do some scanning and seeking, scanning and skimming, as well as now sequencing. Now, another thing I like to do with this is, especially if you're studying with someone, after you do the sequencing, you can even do different fables if you want, and then paraphrase the story to your friend. So tell your friend then in your own words what happened in the story. Now, the reason we would do that is it gets us better at paraphrasing, but also better understanding sequences and putting it into meaning, which is all stuff we need to do while we're doing the IELTS exam. So the next thing then, and the last thing that we do, is deriving meaning. This is exactly what we did earlier today. We did the true, false, not given. We were trying to derive meaning from the text. What does this actually mean? What is actually happening? So with this, what I would like you to do is, what meaning or lesson can you get from this fable? Okay, and please put your answers into the chat. And if anyone's having trouble understanding what I mean, what lesson can we learn from this? These are some things to consider. For example, why did the bat lie? What else could have the bat done? What would have you done? So looking at stuff like this, can anyone give me an option of a lesson or a meaning that you got from this text? Interesting. The bat wasn't accepted because of its laziness. Was the bat lazy? Okay, any other options? Now, the good news about these as well is sometimes there's more than one meaning with fables. So there's not necessarily a correct answer, but there will be with some of the other texts. But it's the skill of developing the skill, of being able to extract meaning from stuff that you read that's important. So don't have a lot of other interactions, so I'll go through some of the stuff that it might have been. Okay. So these are some of the issues that you might have came up with. Problems with indecision, not being able to make a decision, or using the idiom sitting on the fence. So refusing to make a decision either way to a choice. It also could be the importance of being honest and truthful. In this case, the bat wasn't truthful to either side, and it didn't benefit him in the end. Also, that our actions have consequences. So the decisions you make in life are going to influence what happens to you later on. So again, the reasons for going through some of this is simply to get better at reading and get better at pulling out the meaning. And as you can do this with fables. You can also do it with a lot of other reading materials other than just IELTS reading. But overall, we want to look at getting better at those skills of deriving meaning, setting up sequencing, scanning, seeking, and scanning and seeking, especially for keywords and such. Okay. Now I'm going to move on to listening, but if there's any other questions with reading, we can take them up at the end. Okay. I would like to go through some listening things now. And I'm trying to be, with what we're doing today, I'm going to be rather broad. So we're going to look at a few different things. So hopefully at least one, if not all the things, will help you improve your skills. Okay. So the first thing I want to look at is signpost words. Can anyone tell me what signpost words are? What is a signpost word? I'll write it into the chat as well so you can see signpost words. Okay, maybe no one's heard of these. Signpost words, you've definitely seen them. Basically, signpost words are used to tell us a direction, where the talk is going. And by listening to them, you'll be able to know who the speaker is going, what they're going to say next, or what direction they're going to take the conversation. So let me give you some examples. We'll skip over that. We'll look at, actually, let's look at listening in general first. So these are some of the things we need to do. Trying to remember small information, recognizing word differences, and recognizing keywords. We'll look at this in a section 1 in a little bit. Key transitions in a discourse. This is what we're talking about with signpost words. Okay, the transition in a discourse, so a discourse being a talk or a narrative. So where are they going to move? What direction are they going? Okay, grammatical relationships, these are always important as well. Remember, your answers are going to be grammatically correct, so it's very important to look at the words, the grammar that's given in the test, because a lot of times that can help us to decide what word should be used or what number of words, or it could be as simple as knowing when to use something as singular or plural. And of course, if it's supposed to be a plural word and you don't write that, that would be considered wrong. So that's very important as well. Then we have stress and intonation, which also lets us know about some of the function of the sentence. But let's look at signpost words first. So these are signpost words. What they do is they give us a direction, as I said. So this is what they might do: signal a contrast or an opposite. So they're going to say the opposite of what is currently being said. Introducing an example, where they give us an example of what we're talking about. They might be giving a reason why something happened. They might be adding additional information. They could be setting out the stages of a talk. So the sequencing we were doing before with the reading again. Or they could be signaling an explanation or a result as well. And that's a possibility as well. So let's look at some signpost words, and I'll get together, we'll go through and decide what direction they're going, and then I'll give you examples of how to use them in the actual listening test. Okay, so these are some signpost words you might see within a sentence, even though, also, unlike. Okay, what we'll do is we'll go through each of them quickly and just decide on which direction they're signaling. So we have although. So for example, you might say, although profits were up in the first quarter, and even without hearing the rest of the sentence, we should know what direction it's going. So is although 1 to 6, which I'll let you pop this into the chat. Okay, I saw someone's, okay, perfect. So although is number 1, excellent. So we know they're going to say the opposite. So for my example, if I said, although profits in the first quarter were up, overall sales are down. So we know it's going to be the opposite of what is currently being said. Okay, we'll go through these, and I see we have some participants in the chat, so that's perfect. What about even though? Numbers 1 to 6, please. 1 again, very good. Okay, there's going to be a lot of contrasts. Let's go with despite now. Excellent, it is 1 as well. Okay. Let's move on to even if. Okay, yes. even if I see we had 1 and 3, even if is actually 1, because what we'll be saying is even if the weather is good, we still won't be going to the beach. So it's going to be a contrast. What about also though? Also, this one is different. For, excellent, providing extra information. What about so? Oh, we're getting a few different ones. I've seen 3 and 5. Neither of these. Yes, it is 6. Whoever just put that in. Signaling an explanation or a result. When we hear so, you know they're going to either explain something or tell us what happened, what has happened. Okay. Let's go on to but. 1 again. Very good. While. Oh, okay, we're getting a few. I've had 4 and 5. Actually, this is also number 1. It's a contrast or opposite on this one. So while profits are up, sales are down. Okay, what about because? Three. Yes, I'm getting lots of 3s. Good. It's giving a reason, cause and effect, as well as. Okay, I'm seeing 4 and 2. This was 4. So as well as, it's the same as also. They're going to give you additional information about what they're currently talking about. Unlike. Yes, 1 again, and whereas. Excellent one as well. Okay, we have a couple more of these. So these were signpost words that you usually see within a sentence. There's also signpost words to link to sentences. So we'll go through these yet. On one hand, but on the other hand would be which. Which number? 1 again, very good. In addition. For, extra information, just like also and although. Sorry, also. Again, good. For instance. I see lots of 2s. Yes, this is introducing an example. So if they say, for instance, you know they're going to provide an example of what they're speaking about. Consequently. We're seeing 5 and 6. This would be 3 as well. Consequently would be 6. It's going to say what the final result was. So they might be talking about wildfires in Australia. Consequently, there was a lot of damage to all the woodland area and wildlife. So now result. First of all, this is 5 sequencing. Very good. Lastly. 5s again, good. Then 5s again, good. This should be 5, yes. Setting out stages of the talk or sequencing. Okay, however. 1, very good. For example. 2, of course, yes. By contrast. Excellent, that's number 1. And finally, in other words. Okay, I've seen a 1 and a 6 and a 4. In other words would be 6. So this is signaling an explanation in this way. So if they say in other words, they're going to paraphrase what they've just said and say it in a different way to explain it. Okay, very good, everyone. So these words are very important. You've probably used them a lot in your writing. but I'll show you why they're going to be important in listening. So what I would like you to do here is this answer. We have car manufacturers today are working on ways to reduce our dependency on oil, for instance. Now, we should be able to know the answer of this just by looking at the signpost words. So is this A, B, or C? Please put your answers into the chat. Okay, seeing lots of A's and B's. Okay, let's go through this. So first off, for instance, we saw from the previous slide, for instance, signals an example. So we know they're going to give us examples of how car manufacturers are working to reduce our dependency on oil or to use less oil. So all the answers we had were A and B. So let's look at first off C to say why it's not C. There has been no real economic incentive until recently, meaning there is no economic incentive being funding or money until recently. This wouldn't be the answer though, because we know we're looking for an example of how they're reducing dependency on oil. Okay, let's look at A next. People can walk to work instead of driving to save fuel. Now this could be the answer, except we need to look at what we're talking about. We're talking about car manufacturers. Car manufacturers are companies that make cars. So is an example of car manufacturing reducing dependency on oil? Would an example be people walking to work to save fuel? No, it wouldn't. So this wouldn't be an example because it's talking about people, individuals like you, yourself, and myself, not car manufacturers. Now, if we look at B, some new cars run on a combination of petrol and electric power. This is exactly an example of how car manufacturers can reduce oil dependency by having cars that use less petrol. Okay, so if you saw that on your listening exam, even without hearing the audio, we should be able to understand what answer is likely. Now, this is important because sometimes we'll be able to know, let's say we don't know if it's A or B, but we can remove C. So we might be able to remove one answer and then listen to see if it's A or B, which makes it easier for us. Let's do one last example of this. So we have not only Swahili spoken by the people of East Africa, it is also. Okay, please put your answers into the chat. All right, I'm seeing a lot of C's, 1 or 2 B's. Okay, so first off, oh, okay, excellent. I see someone even provided an explanation of why. So also, of course, being a signpost word that means in addition to. So we know it's spoken by the people of East Africa. So we're talking about the language and who speaks it. So if we look at A first, full of Portuguese and Arabic words, this could be true of Swahili, but this is speaking about the language itself of Swahili, not by who speaks it. So A is not the answer, which no one had chosen. B, it is quite difficult to learn. The same reason it can't be B, because again, we're talking about the language itself and whether it's easy or difficult to learn, not about who speaks it. Whereas the last one, it's used as a language of trade. So it's used to buy and sell goods between other African countries. So because of the signpost word also, we can know that the answer must be C, because we need it to be talking about, in addition to people of East Africa speaking Swahili, who else speaks it? Okay. Well, before we go to that, okay, so just to reiterate, learning the signpost words are very useful. Just like we use them when we do our writing for IELTS and task 2, to direct people to where, to direct the reader to where we're going in our essay. We also use this for talks when we're speaking. So especially in sections 3 and 4 of the listening test, it's quite helpful to know where the speaker is going. And we'll do an example of section 4 in a little bit later. Okay, the next thing I want to go through is, this is at prediction mostly and keywords. The easiest way to highlight this is to look through a section 1. So what we have here is cycling holiday in Austria. Now we can see by that we can know the topic, so we know what we're talking about. We also know it's section 1, so we should know that there will be 2 speakers. Now we want to look at prepositions when we're doing predictions and keywords. So if we look at, we'll just look at the prediction for each of these. Holiday begins on. So the preposition on, we know it's asking when the holiday begins. So we'll just do some prediction. What type of a word would this be? A date. Very good. Okay. And we can see that. What about number 2? No more than people in cycling group. Excellent. A number. Very good. Number of people. Perfect. Okay. Now, number 3, each day group cycles on average. What would you predict to be the answer there? I heard someone say a distance. That is good. Now that's important. A distance rather than say a number. And the reason for that is, if it was just a number, we're saying how much they cycle. So we should have a unit as well. So whether that's meters, kilometers, could actually be a time. Someone said frequency. It could be how long they travel. So it could be hours, but we know we need a unit. And the key word there that's most important, of course, is on average. So we're averaging how much. We're not giving an exact amount. We're saying how much generally do we do. Okay, so that's definitely a keyword to listen for. So we know we're not doing total distance. We're not doing longest or shortest trips. Okay, number 4, some hotels have a, what would this be? It is a noun. What type of a noun? Facility, yes. So the type of noun would be a facility. So some facility that the hotel has, whether they have a kitchen, whether they have a lounge area, gym, anything like that. Okay, amenities as well, yes. Okay, number 5, pretty easy. Hotel costs per person. This is, of course, just a number. And we can see we have pounds, the pound signs. We know it's going to be in pounds for the currency. And number 6, all food included except. All right, someone put in food. Could be a type of food. Yeah. Someone put meals. Yes, that's very good. It could be a meal or a type of food. Or it could be something related like drinks. Someone put breakfast or something. So a meal, yeah, it could be breakfast. It could be lunch. Could be any of that. Okay. All right, let's try to go through this then. I'll play this recording and just record your answers.
10 has been written in the space. Now we shall begin. You should answer the questions as you listen, because you will not hear the recording a second time. Listen carefully and answer questions 1 to 6.
Holidays for you. Sean speaking. Can I help you?
Oh, hi. I've been looking at your website. I'm interested in a cycling holiday in Austria in April.
We have 2 trips in April. One lasts 14 days and the other 10 days.
I think the 10-day trip is better. So let's see. I've got a calendar here. What are the dates?
Well, that trip is in the middle of the month. It starts on the 17th of April and it finishes on the 27th.
That suits me. I can't leave work before the 10th of April.
Let me see if there are any spaces. Is it just for yourself?
Myself and my sister, so 2 of us.
Yes, we have spaces.
Is it a big group?
At the moment, there are 12 people booked on this trip, and with you 2, that will be 14. The maximum number is 16, so it's almost fully booked. We can't go over that because it's hard to keep a larger group together.
I need to check that I'm fit enough for this, but the distances look okay. The website says we'll ride approximately 45 kilometers a day. Is that right?
That's correct. And I've got the exact distances here. It really depends on which part of the trip. Some days are only 35 kilometers and some are more. But you'll never have to cycle more than 50 kilometers in one day.
Oh, okay. I can manage that.
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Test 1, exact day. Is that right?
That's correct. And I've got the exact distances here. It really depends on which part of the trip. Some days are only 35 kilometers and some are more. But you'll never have to cycle more than 50 kilometers in one day.
Oh, okay. I can manage that. And we stay in hotels?
Yes, they all have restaurants and the rooms have ensuite facilities.
And do they have pools? It's how I relax after a long day.
There is a swimming pool in a few of the hotels, but none of them has a gym.
I don't think we'll need a gym after all that cycling. I'd better find out how much the holiday costs before I get too excited.
Including flights, it's £1,177 for one person.
Oh, we'll book our own flights on the internet.
That's just £1,013 then. And we can book insurance for you if you want.
And which meals are included in that price?
Well, breakfast, of course, and the hotels will provide you with a packed lunch each day. We do stop during the afternoon in a village somewhere for a rest, so any snacks you buy then are extra. Then dinner will be in the hotel every evening, and that's included in the price of the holiday.
Before you hear...
Okay, we'll stop there. We'll go through each one then. Let's start with the holiday begins on. Okay, yes, we are looking at... Okay, so we have quite a few different things here. So the correct answer is the 17th of April. I want to point out some things because one person just said, a few people just said April. That would be marked wrong. So be careful with that. You would need the full date. So April 17th. Someone's misspelled April. Just be careful about that as well, because a misspelling would be it's wrong. And someone wrote April 10 days, middle of April, date 17 to 27. That would exceed the word count, so that would actually be marked wrong. So be careful with how you phrase your answers, okay? All right. Let's do the next one. No more than how many people? And we're seeing 16, yes. So 16 is the maximum. We wanted the maximum number of people. Okay. Each day the group cycles how long? Number 3. Okay, we've seen a wide variety of answers here. Anything from 16 to 35, 45, 50. Okay. The answer here is 45. Now, the reason it's 45, they said, is, as I said before, on the key word was on average. So that's roughly how much they cycle every day. 35, the 35 figure was the minimum they would ever cycle, and 50 was the maximum. So they would never do more, but we want the average, which of course we would add up all the distances and divide by the number. So we are looking for 45 here. Okay, number 4. Okay. Okay, I'm seeing swimming pool and gym. Okay, the answer would be either pool or swimming pool. Okay, they did mention a gym, but the gym was a distractor. Now the distractors, for those who don't know, I'll put that word into the chat, distractor. A distractor is when they say an answer that's wrong, just to see if you're listening correctly. So he said that none of them have, most of them have pools, none of them have a gym. And she said she wouldn't need it anyway because they'd be cycling. So they mentioned that as a way just to make sure that you're listening correctly. So we always want to listen for distractors, and that's why it's always good to know why an answer is as such. When you're doing practice, especially if, let's say, it's multiple choice, or, well, it doesn't have to be multiple choice actually. When you're doing practice, it's good to look at your options, and if they mention 3 things, if they can see, oh, I'm sorry, I think I put that to the wrong one. Thank you. Okay, now you should be able to see it, distractor. So if they give 3 options, it's good to listen to it again, even going through the transcript and then looking at why, not only what the answer is, but why are the other 2 not the answer? So in this case, why is gym not the answer and why pool is? Or in the last one we did, why is 45 the answer and not, why is 50 not the answer? Why is 30 not the answer? Okay, number 5, costs. And we look at that. Yes, that looks good. 1,013. No, be careful. I saw one person had 10,030, so it's 13. So 1,013, and of course that was because with flights it would be 1,177, but 113 without. Okay, let's look at the last ones then. All food included except. Okay, we have a variety of answers here. Dinner, snacks, lunch. Okay. So let me play that very ending again.
Extra. The packed lunch each day.
Oh, it's right here, sorry.
And which meals are included in that price?
Well, breakfast, of course, and the hotels will provide you with a packed lunch each day. We do stop during the afternoon in a village somewhere for a rest, so any snacks you buy then are extra.
Okay, so in this case, the answer is snacks. They said breakfast is included, so we know it's not breakfast, and that the hotel provides a packed lunch. So they pack you a lunch, so we know it's not that. So the answer would be snacks. Now, a few people put snack. It's very important that you have the plural, okay? Or this would be marked wrong. So be very careful with plurals that you're using the correct plural, okay? Now, simply by looking at number 6, we can tell that it's snacks and not snack. And the reason is we can tell by the grammar. All food included except snacks. That's grammatically correct. If it was snack, it would have to be all food included except a snack. Okay? So be careful, but when you put the answers in, but once you're given that 30 seconds to check, that's a good time to look and be like, okay, this has to be snacks, because grammatically it's not correct if it's singular. Okay? All right. Okay, we have a couple more things to do. So the next thing I'd like to do, and of course these are the answers here. Okay. And just some tips, I guess, when you go through. When you're having trouble doing this, it's always good as well to do to use a transcript, especially if it's a difficult reading like the last one we're going to do, to go through and isolate where the words are and why. It is a good way of not only checking, but also getting a better understanding of what you heard versus what was actually said. Okay. And just briefly, to improve listening, these are some things you can use. Remember, it doesn't have to all be IELTS listening. Listening to the radio and listening to English speakers, listening to English songs. There's some good websites here. BBC has some great listening for learning English. And there's also this ELO website, which is good for different accents. It's also very good for, it's more, I would say, beginner to pre-intermediate. But then there's a few others. 6 Minute English is another one that I remember that it's a bit more intermediate and upper intermediate. And it's basically just a 6 minute podcast that you can listen to about a topic. And you could do that once a day. If you did that, once a day every morning, it's a good way of getting your listening skills to sharpen and get better. Okay. Let's see. Tips for that. Okay, I had one question I'll just deal with quickly before we move on, and that is multiple choice sessions. Tips for that. The biggest thing with multiple choice is to go through first and look at the keywords. Look at the keywords in the question so you know exactly what you're looking for. And then look at the keyword of each option and how they're different. Once you do that, when you want to listen, this is where signpost words are important, because they sometimes will signal the answer, kind of like in the multiple choice we did earlier. Also, we want to listen for when they rule out answers. And what I mean by that is when they tell you clearly that this one is not the answer, that you want to be able to strike that out. Now, the listening we just did wasn't multiple choice, but let's say it was, and we had, let's say we had 3 different distances, for example. once they say you'll never have to go more than 50 kilometers, we know that's the maximum. So we know that's not the answer. So it's very important, just as important as finding the right answer, it's important to cross out the answers that you know it's not. Because at the very least, if it's A, B, and C, and you can know it's not C, then even if you have to guess, you at least have a 50% chance instead of a 33% chance of getting the right answer. Okay? So listening for the distractors and eliminating answers is probably something that not enough students do, and it's something that can really help with your multiple choice session. Okay, let's look on to, I'll go over something just briefly with maps because I want to have enough time to go through the last thing. A lot of students struggle with maps, and the best way is overall practice. So I'm only going to go through one example here. Well, these two, I guess. What you want to be able to do is figure out, basically, when you look at the map first, the first things you want to do is look at what do you know. So we can see this compass at the top, north, east, south, west. So we know that they're probably going to make references to the northern part or the south side of the lake or the northeastern forest or something like that. So that's important. And then to look at everything else. So we can see a car park, which might be useful, the entrance. Always look at where the map starts. So in this case, the visitor center, it says you are here. So we know that everything's going to be, that's the point of reference that everything is going to come out of. And we can also see we have 2 lakes, a bridge, an education center, and some steps and some trees. Okay, so going through this, we're going to look at the actual transcript. So we're looking for Joe Tremin sculptures. So we might say, take a look at the Joe Tremin sculptures, which are displayed on this side of Upper Lake, just behind the education center near the bridge. So we're going through, we can see the visitor center, we know where we are. It's on this side of the lake, meaning because we are at the visitor center, we know it's going to be, it's got to be either F or E because everything else is on the other side of the lake. Okay, now this side of the lake, just behind the education center near the bridge. So education center being here, it's behind that, and near the bridge, that has to be E. Okay, let's do the next one. Giorgio Catalucci bird sculptures. They're just across the bridge on the north side of Lower Lake. So what letter would this be? Let me read that again. Just across the bridge on the north side of Lower Lake. All right, I'm seeing firstly C. Yes, that is correct. So north side of, we can see it's across the bridge, so we know it's going to be A, B, C, or D. And because it's on the north side of Lower Lake, it can only be C because D is on the west side and B is northeast. Okay. We'll do one more, maybe Garden Galley. It's on this side of Upper Lake. From the visitor center, go to the education center and keep along the path and you'll see it on your right. So because it's on this side of the lake, which one would this be? Let me read it one more time. It's on this side of Upper Lake. From the visitor center, you go to the education center and keep going along the path until you see it on the right. Excellent. Yes, it is F. So it's on this side of the lake. We already had E, so we know it has to be F, but then it also says going from the education center up the path and on to the right. Now, lastly, the Longhouse. You go to the bridge, turn left on the other side. So you're seeing a winding path going up towards the northern boundary of the park. So Which one would that be? Let me read it one more time, sorry. I seeing A and C. Now C we've already had, so we know it can't be C. Go onto the bridge, turn left, and look for a winding pathway. So if we're doing that across the bridge, turning left towards C and D, but we're looking for a winding pathway, that would be this snake-like things going up north, and it says north as well, so we know it's going to be A. Okay, so if anyone's having trouble with maps, I do encourage you just to practice a lot more. It's good to take a test, listen to it and try, and then go through with the transcripts and actually draw on the map so you can see where everything is going. Okay. Okay, and sometimes blank maps activities can be good too. But I want to do one more thing. So what I would like to do here for the last part of the listening is address, for those people that are looking to get 7, 8, or 9 on the listening test, a big part of that is doing well on section 4. Section 4 is a long lecture by one person, and usually on an academic subject, and it can be quite difficult. So what I would like to do is do a quick example here to show you how to approach this. Now, in this particular one, we're looking views of the Mediterranean history. So we know it's the history of the Mediterranean Sea. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. And we have what we need to do, which view has been expressed by each historian of the Mediterranean. So we can see we have 3 historians, Michel Ballard, Fernand Baudel, and Nicholas Horden. And we just need to select A to F for each one. Okay. Now, keywords are very important. So I'll go through them just quickly so we have enough time to listen. National politics have strongly influenced the Mediterranean's history. So the keywords, of course, are national politics. So this is talking mostly about politics. Then we have B, history of the Mediterranean needs to be understood in relation to other seas. So the keywords in relation to other seas. So we're going to be talking about other bodies of water. C, the physical geography of the Mediterranean has determined its people's behavior. This is the geography, so the things you see in the landforms are determining the actions of people. Ecological change has been the biggest influence on the history of the Mediterranean. So ecological change, dealing with the environment. E, sea access enabled distant societies to interact culturally around the Mediterranean. So having access to the sea, the body of water, allowed communities that live further away to interact with each other. And lastly, F is exchanging raw materials around the Mediterranean linked countries together. So the trade of raw materials, okay? Let's listen to this quickly and then we will go, actually, given the time, I will stop it as we go and we hit each answer. So I can show you where that is just because we are running out of time, okay? So let's play this.
Now listen to the rest of the talk and answer questions 38 to 40. However, I referred before to the question of needing to consider how to approach history. Assumptions about what history is are as varied as the historians who have made the Mediterranean the subject of their studies. 3 key historians have moulded in different ways our approaches to understanding the Mediterranean's past: Michel Ballard, Fernand Baudel, and Nicholas Horden. Okay, so many times in section 4, they usually talk for a good, in this case, it was 36 seconds. A lot of times it's anywhere from 30 seconds to a minute 10.
where they might talk without giving any answers. So we're listening for, the key here is when she mentions 3 historians and their names, so we know the first answer will be forthcoming.
The first of these, Ballard, felt strongly that an approach based on examining countries around the Mediterranean as if they shaped its history was inadequate. More was to be learned, he argued, by treating the Mediterranean as one of a number of seas, such as the Black Sea and the Atlantic Ocean, and thus integrated into trading routes that stretched from Madeira to Krakow.
Okay, now, would anyone like to suggest what the answer to that would be? Okay, I'm seeing a few. Ballard is B. No. Ballard is B, and that is the answer. And what, so, now someone mentioned A, and the difference here is that national politics, if we look at the first one, they did mention different countries, but he said that was inadequate and that it should be understood by looking at the different bodies of water, and they mentioned the Black Sea and a bunch others. Okay, so that is the answer, is B. Very good. Let's listen to the next one.
Our second historian, Fernand Braudel, took a rather different, though related, tack. He argued that the ways societies operate, right down to their individual members' actions, is subject to permanent conditions, such as whether they inhabit mountain, plain, or sea. Features of the coastline and adjacency to the waters of the Mediterranean are thus the focus of his approach.
Okay, what answer would this be? Okay, I'm seeing C, E. Okay, we're getting C and E. So the key here, they did mention sea access for trade, but the key thing they mentioned was the landforms. So the mountains, whether the people live in the mountains, by the sea, and such. So that is the physical geography. So the answer to this one is going to be C, because of looking at the physical geography. So whether people inhabit the mountains, the sea, the forests, okay? And let's do the last one then.
And then we can add a third way of looking at history, or at least the history of the Mediterranean, and that's the one propounded by Nicholas Horden. His arguments are asserted quite strongly, not least because he sees a greater consistency across time than many other historians have allowed for. There are those who take ecological events, particularly catastrophes such as the volcanic destruction of Pompeii, to be the shapers of different sections of the Mediterranean's history. Horden says these are simply incidents, and that the major trends ride...
Okay, I'll stop that just because they mentioned about volcanic catastrophe and such. So they were talking about ecological change. Now, in this particular case, he said it's, again, not the best way to understand. So we can actually say that D would not be the answer. Okay, now there's one more.
Through them. For him, while there may be cultural mutations and fashions in types of consumer goods, what matters is the system of trading goods that satisfy primary needs, such as grain, oil, metals, and timber.
Okay, this would be what? F, very good. So it's important to look, they first gave 2 distractors. They first mentioned about ecological change with volcanic catastrophes. Then they also mentioned cultures. So those were both to kind of trick you. But then if we listen to the signpost words, she said, but actually, and she went on with what he thought. For him, what really mattered was this. And of course, being raw materials, as they mentioned, oil, amongst a few different ones. Okay, excellent. All right, that that is where we will stop here, and we'll go on to questions. So first off, hope you have enjoyed everything so far. I hope you found it very useful, and I'll do my best to answer the questions you have. I see a couple on the Q&A thing right now, so I will go through each of them one at a time. So firstly was said how to make optimum use of transcripts. So transcripts can be very useful overall. I would say especially when dealing with maps and in dealing with section 3 and 4. So for example, the ones we just did was the section 4, the last 3 questions. One of the good ways to go through that, especially after you've done the listening one time, is to listen again, but follow it through with the transcripts. For each one, underline the answers, but also circle the distractors so you can see, and then look for any potential signpost words as well that let you know that they had changed the direction of the talk. Okay, so I would use it mostly for that. Let's look at, I've answered the multiple choice one already, so we'll leave that one. Okay, and then let's look at, I'm always stuck at 7.5 to 8 in the listening section, and I have no idea how to improve this score. How should I practice for it? Okay, I would say the biggest thing with that is what section seems to be giving you the most difficulty. I mean, those are good scores for sure, 7.5 to 8, but are you struggling mostly in the end of section 4, or is it section 3? Okay, 1 and 2 being the most, the easiest and most straightforward, I would say probably you're already getting 8 or 9 out of 10 correct there, possibly even 10. What I would focus on mostly is, I guess I would look at what section you're having the most trouble with. And chances are it's sections 3 and or 4, because you're going to approach them slightly different. Section 3 has 3 to 4 different speakers that are interacting. But I think whereas like section 4 is just one person talking, what I would recommend, I guess, is to go through a listening. I would also use a transcript as well. So try to find out why. So do it once, find out where your answers are, and then go through the ones you didn't get and see why you selected the wrong answer. And then is there a way to do it that you could avoid this again? So for example, we spent some time on signpost words. They usually will tell you where you're going. Also, did you miss any key paraphrase words or synonyms? Because it's quite possible that maybe what you need to do is expand one area of your vocabulary. Now, if it's section 3, because it's an academic subject, expanding some vocabulary around academia, so universities, words that we use in lectures, tutorials, all that might help, but I would recommend that. Let's see, I've been struggling with false, I've been struggling with false and not given, though I located the place, the answer. How can I deal with this? Okay, so we did a little bit of it today. If you're finding the area it's at, that's good. We've located that. So you just need to look for what exactly says that it's true or not true, or whether the answer exists. So for example, we did a false and a not given today, where we looked at, let me just go, I might actually pop back to that real quick. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Okay, we're having some issues with that. Okay, there we go. Reading. Right there. Okay, so in this particular one, okay, so if you're finding the area, which we found here, then we got to look at what we're trying to find. We're finding in this way, look at the keywords, missing end of boat, identify that, boat's northern end. Okay, then you need to go through, okay, did they return to the site? So look for words like the possibility of returning. Okay, so we know we're talking about whether they can go back or not. And then we have but. So another signpost word, but. So they wanted to return, but. So we know it's going to be a contrast. So it's probably not going to be true. Practical and financial difficulties were insurmountable. It cost too much money and it just wasn't possible. From a practical standpoint, insurmountable, can't be done. In this case, we can see false. So what you want to look at, located in the text, make sure you're clear about what you're looking for. In this case, did they go back? And look for words like signpost words, so but, giving us a contrast. And then when you have a word like insurmountable, that is key as well, because it's saying we can't achieve this in any way. So we know it's going to be false. Now the next one, in this one in particular, we looked at the keywords boat had been used for trade. That's all we need. Here, we can see with the keywords evidence is repeated, bronze age is repeated, but this says community. This infers a boat because you would assume that a community living by the sea would have a boat, but it doesn't say anything about a use of the boat, okay? So hopefully that was helpful. Okay, let's go back to the next question. How to utilize gap between sessions efficiently. I assume you're talking about the listening, like between the sections, one and like the 30 seconds you have to go before. I'll answer it like that because that's how I understand it. Basically, what you want to be using at that time is the way you want to be using that time is you want to take that, if you have 30 seconds to check your answers, go through, and what I had said previously, check just that the grammar is correct. So we had the example of snack instead of snacks, where that answer wasn't grammatically correct. So to check, so take the time just to quickly look, is this grammatically correct? Did I have too many words? Or should this be a plural or not? Okay. If you have more time, if you've already done that and there's still more time, you want to flip to the next section right away and start doing the keywords and predictions, because you want to utilize that time as effectively as possible. Okay. Let's see. How to refine words to learn for reading skill. Do I have any sources for the words cramming process? Cramming for tests and languages don't really go together. Languages are built over time, and it's more of a process. So one of the problems that students have is they just attend class and then they hope they can cram 2 days before and do well on an IELTS test. You really can't. It's more of a daily practice thing, working on building language over time, especially if you're looking at reading, because the biggest thing we need here is an expanded vocabulary. The best thing you can do is expand your vocabulary by listening to different things that I had mentioned earlier and set up a few of the resources, and doing reading, even reading other books that you're interested in English. And if you're finding that there's particular topics you don't know anything about, then maybe go and try to read up another article about the same topic. There's a lot of really good English websites that can give you different readings that you can go through, really short ones, same with listening. And I would use that more because it's really building that over time. It's very difficult to go and just try to memorize 100 words and their meanings. So I would suggest not trying to do the cramming. Look at building your language over a day as a way through daily practice. Okay, what is the best way to divide the time in the IELTS reading test? Okay, well, we have 1 hour, 60 minutes, and we have 3 readings. So we should roughly allot 20 minutes per test. Now, what I would do though, is when you get into that, you want to go through and do the easiest things first. So if you're really good at the headings, go through and do the headings first. Or if you're going through and you find that the true false not given is difficult this time, leave it and do it last, because you want to get all the easier answers that you're able to get. If you can get an answer more easily, you want to do those first to make sure you're going to get the highest score possible. Then when you have time, go back. Once you've answered those, go back and go through the ones you haven't done. So especially, let's say, for example, someone had said they were having trouble with true, false, not given. If you're having trouble with that, leave those till the end. Go through and do all the other ones, because those where you're going to get the best scores, and then do your weakness after. I would recommend that because it's very important. Or if you're going through and maybe you're really good at headings, but these are particularly difficult, leave them and come back to them at the end. Right. The other thing I would say is make sure that you give yourself a quick time, maybe a minute or two at the end, that any answers you haven't answered, especially if they're like headings, true, false, not given, where you can easily guess, you can fill them in the last minute as a way of augmenting your score. Okay. Let's look at the next one. Can you share some tips about multiple choice in the listening test? I kind of discussed this already. But just to reiterate, what I would say is the biggest thing is going through doing keywords, spending your time on the keywords of the questions, so you know what you're listening for. And if there's any particular words, so for example, it wasn't multiple choice, but when we did that, distances on average was the keyword that basically made or break the question, broke the question. So what we want to do is look at the keywords so we know what we are looking for, and then look at the keyword of each of the answers. Now, once you go through the listening, as you're hearing, if you notice at the end of the last session we did, section 4 with the 3 historians, I had paused it at one point just to be like, oh, he's mentioned this, and they said he doesn't think that's important. So crossing out answers is just as important in multiple choice as getting the right one. So because it allows us to have a better opportunity to get a better score. So in that case, if you're going through and I don't know if I can flip to that or not, but given where that was, if you know an answer is not one thing, it's going to take a long time to get back there. If you know the answer is not one thing, you want to cross it out right away, because then at the very end, if you need to guess, obviously we don't want to guess, we want to get the correct answer every time. But if you do need to guess, you have reduced the amount of options from which to guess. Oh, there it is right there. So if we're looking at this, for example, the last one, which we know was F, he at first mentioned D and E. So if you're hearing these and you hear ecological change wasn't important, right away just cross out D. And then they mentioned culturally, but they didn't say enough. So it could be E. So you might listen for the longer until it was clear because of the raw materials. But crossing out answers is very helpful. And listening for the distractors and noting why. So when you're practicing, especially when if you're having trouble with multiple choice, when you practice, listen to it once, give your answers, go back and listen again, or even use the transcript and decide not only what the answer is, but why the other 2 aren't the right answer. And if you do that more often, you'll get better at being able to discriminate between the answers. Okay, hopefully that was helpful. I think that was the last question, and we are at 11:30 anyway. So thank you very much for your time today and for attending. And I'll turn this back over to the host to say it out. Thank you very much. I hope you found it helpful, and have a great Sunday.
Thank you, Gary, for your sharing. Cảm ơn các bạn rất là nhiều vì những câu hỏi cũng như là sự tương tác tích cực trong chương trình ngày hôm nay. Thì nếu như mà các bạn có bất kỳ một thắc mắc nào khác liên quan tới kỳ thi IELTS cũng như là các hỗ trợ của IDP, thì các bạn có thể liên hệ trực tiếp với văn phòng IDP tại các thành phố Sài Gòn, Hà Nội và Đà Nẵng qua số hotline 19006955, hoặc là chờ đón các buổi hội thảo cũng như là các buổi chia sẻ chuyên sâu kế tiếp của IDP bằng cách là theo dõi kênh fanpage của IELTS IDP, hoặc là theo dõi kênh YouTube IELTS IDP Việt Nam cũng như là kênh TikTok ha, để cùng chờ đón những thông tin mới nhất cũng như là các buổi hội thảo kế tiếp của IELTS IDP. Một lần nữa xin cảm ơn các bạn đã dành thời gian cho buổi sáng cuối tuần rất là năng lượng ngày hôm nay để cùng cập nhật những cái kiến thức cũng như là những chia sẻ bổ ích đến từ IELTS IDP cùng với chuyên gia thầy Gary ha. Và xin gửi lời chào một lần nữa và hẹn gặp lại các bạn trong các buổi chia sẻ cũng như là các chương trình hỗ trợ học thuật kế tiếp của IDP Việt Nam.